So I'll start off by introducing myself. I'm Anand Budram, a founder and current head of the Caribbean Voice, which is an NGO that is engaged in suicide and abuse prevention, framework within mental health activism and advocacy across the Caribbean and in the Caribbean diaspora. This panel discussion is one of a series that we launched last year during the pandemic, where we bring activists, advocates, experts, and so on from across the Caribbean and the diaspora to discuss, brainstorm, generate ideas relating to various issues that relate to what we do. And in some cases like this one, for example, to hopefully extrapolate all those ideas and put them within a framework that can be offered as a paradigm for preventing suicide that we can in turn share with stakeholders in the Caribbean, starting with the governments and going all the way down to community-based organizations. I'm going to ask the host to introduce themselves one at a time, starting with Nadi.
Oh, okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Nadi Prasad. I just want to thank Mr. Budram for the invite to be a part of this chat. I'm hoping that we have a good discussion about how we can share information around this, what seems like an epidemic. I'm going to call it an epidemic based on what I've been reading, that people are just really faced with lots of struggles in the Caribbean. I'm basically, I'm not an expert on anything. I'm a human rights activist. I believe in the pursuit of happiness and equality and equity for all people. I work with organizations to help abused women to navigate assistance in areas of financial security and safety, like safe houses. I'm people, all people. I had a radio show at one time in New York where we talked about community issues, domestic violence, peer pressure in the school systems, just that navigating the American versus Caribbean, what goes on in the house and what's going on in society and how people navigate that. I've been a part of many organizations that are trying to assist in the happiness and the equality of people. I thank all of you for giving me the time. I look forward to this discussion. Thank you.
Claudette.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Claudette Joyce Spence, and I work in service to and with the African American Caribbean communities through several roles that all seek to help empower and uplift our communities. Some of those roles in which I serve include educator, social and economic justice advocate, primarily a print journalist, nonprofit management, the author of 4 books that empower readers to strive into betterment. And also I am the creator of a family planning model of communications to get us to maintain sustainable joy in all of our relationships. I am thankful for the opportunity to be in service here today, and I look forward for wonderful things coming forth from this gathering. Thank you for inviting me, Mr. Anand.
Thank you, Shani.
Hello, my name is Devashni Sharma. I am a student of Brooklyn College Academy in Brooklyn, New York. I also have a nonprofit by the name of Sistars, which helps to fund sanitary products for girls in the Caribbean. I am hosting on this panel today, and I'm also part of the youth portion of the Caribbean Voice, thanks to Mr. Budram. Today, this issue is something I particularly wanted to speak in. It's a very interesting topic, but it's something that affects many people, especially the youth. And to be able to represent them here, especially Caribbean youth, is very, honorable. And to be here with a lot of very amazing doctors and speakers and thinkers is a great experience. So thank you guys, and I look forward to this meeting.
Okay, and now I'm going to hand over to Claudette to start us off.
Well, thank you. Well, I want to thank all of our panelists for joining us today and to set the expectations for our listeners, particularly to say that we're seeking ways to prevent suicide. You know, particularly our focus is on the Caribbean. So we're looking at what are some of the policies, what are some of the programs, what are some of the strategies that may be implemented. And our panelists here today will introduce themselves and will tell us a little bit about what it is that they are doing that can help us shape, influence policy. So for example, we want to start off by asking our panelists, and you can raise your hand if you are ready to speak. We want to ask our panelists to share one thing that you see that's already working in the context of the work that you do. One thing regarding suicide prevention that you see in your own practice of guiding our communities into a healthier type of living. Who would like to go first? Or is that clear? Is my question clear? Nod your head.
Hi, good evening. Yes, I can go first.
Okay, thank you, Doc.
So
Your name, a little bit about yourself, and then go into that question, please.
Okay, so my name is Fabian Sargent from the beautiful island of Barbados. I'm a professional social worker. I also have a master's in public health. I am currently, I wear many hats, but I work for the government of Barbados as program officer for the Barbados Youth Advanced Corps Program, which is a paramilitary program for youngsters between the age of 16 and 20 years old. So we have a military side, then we have the personal development side, of which that's my portfolio where I have responsibility, along with a counseling department. So you asked, I also have a men's organization. I started a men's organization here in Barbados. August last month was 2 years. We have just under 100 men, and that came out of a very personal experience where I would have lost my sister at the hands of her husband, who then committed suicide. So suicide is very, very close to me, and my family have been affected by it in a major way. You asked about what I have seen in terms of one thing that is working in relation to suicide prevention. I will tell you from the program that I'm with, we have a very active counseling program. Now, I don't think that they would have focused specifically on suicide, but what is offered is a wide range of psychosocial support. I think the stress level of young people, particularly during this COVID time, is extremely high. So having that counseling available to them, counselors not only deal with them at the micro level, but going into their homes and trying to interact with families and see what is going on. I think that is a very, very progressive type of program that can reap results and can mitigate any instance of suicide or suicide ideation. Even though at this time I do think that there's kind of an epidemic, and that is because of the environment of which we are existing right now. Very, very stressful environment. And I think the psychosocial support, while we're offering it within the program, the general support of the community is very limited. So I'll pause there for now.
Okay. When you just mentioned there is a pandemic, of what were you referring to? Is that to suicide?
So I said yes. I consider the suicide ideations as an epidemic here in Barbados, because there seems to be an increasing number of young people, of persons reporting young people, particularly being expressing such tendencies. And as I said, I work with men, and I'm finding that even older men are also contacting me more so now than before, expressing interest in committing suicide. I mean, these men are broke, job loss. When men don't have money in the pocket, And when people don't have money, it puts stress on the relationships. You know, they're not able to support the children, can't pay bills, and men generally don't really cope well. And there's a sense of hopelessness that is starting to develop even amongst the older men. And they can add health issues with that, you know, and then the whole aspect of COVID-19 and, you know, all the challenges associated with that, misinformation, and it's driving a sense of fear. So all of that is contributing to persons having a sense of hopelessness and believing, well, you know, it makes no sense to be here. And that is not the message you really want them to take. You really want to encourage them to value self, understand that they have a purpose, that they have a contribution to make. So yeah, we try to push that positive energy in that direction.
Well, thank you for sharing your experience about something that works in your setting. I'm sure there are several things, and we hopefully time will allow us to get back for you to talk about some more of those things. But thank you for responding to that question.
You're welcome.
Now, is that Dr. Margaret?
Yes.
Would you like to address that question? Would you like me to repeat it?
No. I got the question. So
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me here. I'm Dr. Margaret Naked Chatur. I am the immediate past president of the Trinidad and Tobago Association of Psychologists, also an assistant professor at the University of Trinidad and Tobago. I am the team lead for a hotline that was started in Trinidad and Tobago in March 2020 in response to the pandemic. So it's been a year, more than a year. We've had more than 1,600 callers who called in. And the main purpose of this hotline was to address all of the mental health fallout that came with the pandemic. And amongst this, we found a lot of children and adolescents falling victim to the uncertainties of this pandemic. In the last year, the CIT, which is a crisis intervention team, the name of the hotline, we established ourselves as an expert on mental health perspectives with the assistance of media. We did a lot of things. The World Health Organization, endorsed one of the videos that we did, especially on the Venezuelan migrants who were a neglected group of people within our country. And the title of that video is Luchando contra el COVID-19. We did many other videos addressing the mental health issues, looking specifically at also children and adolescents. As you would know, this is a special focus this year of the International Association for Suicide Prevention, of which I'm the keynote Caribbean representative for that global congress. Because many times when we think of suicide, we address an adult population, not realizing that there are children. Our youngest victim for suicide this year was a 9-year-old boy who took his life by hanging. And as I said, we want to be, or we are an advocate at the moment for mental health issues. I think in the last 2 to 3 years as president, and now immediate past president of the Association of Psychologists, we have addressed mental health and decreased stigma to a very large extent, so much so that we now have the media doing a lot of responsible reporting of things like suicide, because as you know, that could go off tangent, especially if they don't have proper things in place. So as I said, so our main trust, one of the things I say that I'll be very, really want to continue to have happen is the helpline or the hotline that we established, and that continues to address a lot of relationship issues, a lot of mental health fallout, especially within COVID-19. One of the things I'm hoping that we could also address within the conversation is the whole aspect of school alienation and the kinds of pressures this has put not just on students themselves, but on parents who are now have to be teachers and caregivers within the home. I don't know how many of you were able to listen to the PAHO webinar today, which looked at the Americas. And I know Annan was speaking earlier of the increased suicide rates per 100,000, but Guyana continues to lead with 40.8% per 100,000 in the region, followed by Suriname with 25, Uruguay, and then the US with 14.5% in the region. So, you know, we have to really look at it seriously. I do not think that our policies really impact the issue to any significant extent. I am hoping because even in Trinidad, even though we have programs going on, so I do not think that policy really makes a difference, especially to those communities that are underserved. So I'll stop here for the moment, and hopefully we will get into a lot of these issues as the discussion progresses. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Doctor, is there something in particular that makes the hotline so effective?
I think it is because it's free. You know, a lot of people, when they call into the hotline, they usually ask the question, just want to be sure, is this a free service? Because as you know, psychological issues and addressing psychological issues have always been something that either they have to pay for or they go to a clinic where they feel everybody knows their business. So now that this is a sort of anonymous and I think it's also the advocacy that we have been doing, which is to write in a lot of articles in the newspaper so that we are encouraging a lot of people to address mental health as if it were normative, you know, and not as if it were abnormal or something to be very suspicious of as persons helping. So we started off the hotline with 18 psychologists, mental health counselors. This year it has it's just about 12 or 13 now, as people have gone back out to work, and you know they have, but it's a service that started off as a 24/7 Monday to Sunday. So you can imagine the stresses. And as I said, Claudette asked the question, what makes it so vital now? And I think people know that they can call us and they have our attention, because as you would know, many times people just need a listening ear. They don't want people to really solve their problems or tell them what to do. They just want to know that they are listened to, that we can relate to what is happening, and we can lend some sort of solution in the immediate moment.
Thank you, Doc.
Yes.
Thank you. I think, and then we have another panelist who's joined us.
We have Dr. Lorraine Barnaby and we have Dr. Dave Sharma.
Okay, welcome, doctors. We are asking for our panelists to share just one experience, one strategy that is working in the context in which you work, one that is working to help to prevent suicide prevention. And Dr. Margaret has responded, Dr. Fabian has responded. And so if you could share something from your experience for us and our audience in general.
Okay, this is Dr. Lorraine Barnaby. Good evening to
Dr.
everyone.
Lorraine.
Good evening, Doc.
Yes, I was doing a World Suicide Prevention Day talk, which is why I have come on late. However, I am a psychiatrist.
Excuse me, Doc, I'm sorry. I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself, please, what it is that you do, and then also then answer the question about one thing that—
Yes, I was about to tell you what I do.
Thank you.
I am a psychiatrist. I've been with the International Association for Suicide Prevention since 2006. And I was on the board as co-chair of the Council for National Representatives up to 2019. I served my 2 terms, and now I'm off the board until maybe another time and another position, perhaps. I am from Jamaica, and at the moment I am working with the correctional services. The thing that has, I think, been working quite well in Jamaica is also a hotline. We have had 2 exposures to hotlines. One was set up by the Ministry of Education, and it was for the youth. It got overrun by adults. it came to a close. There's another one now, and that one is the Ministry of Health, and it's called, it's a toll-free number, New Life, 888 New Life. And I think that has been, it's afforded the adolescents an opportunity to speak, because from our research in Jamaica and other parts too, but we have done research and we have found that youngsters are actually quite an at-risk group, which actually fits in quite well with the research that's been done within the Caribbean, and even the global situation, where persons aged 15 to 29 are the ones who are dying by suicide. I am going to have to say that the combination of the hotline plus the availability of counseling services at various levels, those two things in combination are what has been working in our situation so far. And Jamaica maintains a low suicide rate compared to other Caribbean territories. Thank you.
Thank you, Doc. Availability of counseling. Could you say a little bit more about how that's made available?
What, the counseling? Yes. Or well, this counseling, there's counseling through our professionals like our psychologists and our psychiatrists. And we have a system of the community mental health service, okay? Of which I used to be the director some long time ago when I worked with the government. That is an island-wide service, and we operate from clinics, general public health clinics, and we also sometimes work from the public hospitals. And we work in conjunction with psychologists as well as mental health nurse practitioners. Mm-hmm. So we offer a specialized service. Persons come, and you can come for various things. You can either come because you need to maintain your treatment for affective disorders like depression, or schizophrenia or anxiety or whatever it is, but you can also go for counseling. This is and of course, the service in Jamaica is more or less, I say more or less free. It's not totally free, because to attend a clinic, you have to pay a small sum to attend a clinic. But we do have this. Now, there's also pastoral counseling, which is done through the churches, and the churches also do hospital visits to people who are ill, and it's whatever the illness is. It could be psychological or it could be physical. We also have the evangelists, the associate evangelists, who also go in to the hospitals and other places, and they reach out to people in a spiritual way. So it's but it's Christian, you know, it's Christian. So other religions may not be able to get that advantage, but there are similar persons with other religions, as I well know from Trinidad and Tobago and from Ghana and other nations within our Caribbean region. Are you hearing me quite well? Because I'm using a cell phone here, you know.
You're
Absolutely.
Coming over loud and clear.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Lorraine. Thank you. And may I ask the same, is it Dr. Sharma? Am I saying that right?
That's correct, Joy. Yeah, so I apologize for joining late myself. Like Dr. Barnaby, I was just coming out of a program that Servier International hosted at Cara Lodge in Guyana. It was a beautiful place, and had a number of people from the community, NGOs, recognizing Suicide Prevention Day. I want to take this opportunity to thank Caribbean Voice for doing this presentation. In terms of the question you asked, I want to say that
Would
in
you tell us
Guyana,
just a little bit about yourself?
oh yes,
please?
no, I'm
Thank
a
you.
psychiatrist by training from the University of West Indies. Also, I hold an academic title of Professor in Behavioral Sciences from Boston University Medical School. I'm back in Guyana now about 2 years and working at the private sector, but still very committed to work in the community and with government and with Mr. Budram's team. Very happy to be here. Want to recognize my daughter, Devashini, who's becoming a feature on the program. She's just a delight to see and to have. So that's a bit about me. I'm also doing some work with Pan American Health, looking at how we can develop a good suicide surveillance system for Guyana, and also a new mental health strategy for Guyana. So that's about myself. In terms of the question about what I see as working, Guyana, as we know, in the Caribbean has had the highest suicide rate among all the Caribbean countries, which is a very sad thing to know. Much higher than our neighbor in Trinidad, which is similar in terms of its demographic profile, population breakdown. And the question is, why does that being the case? I think we've had a very difficult circumstances in Guyana, economic tragedy in a very wealthy country. Thankfully, we are now finding our feet. Things are getting better and the suicide rate is going down. Now, what's working here, there's a lot of activity. We have the NGOs took up leadership when the government sort of flagged away. The government did do its best. The minister previously, Dr. Ramsamy, did a lot of work in community training for gatekeepers, and the Caribbean Voice is also involved in that, in this gatekeeper training program for persons to be able to respond. So response is important. So we can have people call a helpline, which we do have in Guyana. And we have several helplines now. The police helpline has been a big one that we've been working over the years. Caribbean Voice has been advocating for helplines, and there's one that came on recently at the mental health unit. So there are responses out there, but we got to also be sure that we can reach people. And reaching out to people, I think, is the biggest plus. I talked to the police who man the helpline, and they tell me that when they reach out and they send their counselors into the community, they see a very positive response. The rate of actual committing suicide from people who have fallen about feeling that they don't want to live anymore, it's very low. So that's very rewarding to hear. Talking to my group this evening, I found that there are programs at the community level also that's working well. We have a group from the Ministry of Health, the Adolescent Health Unit, which is involved in the communities, at the health centers, in the school, where they go out and they can talk the language that young people are able to relate to, so they can talk about their feelings. So it's a matter of how we can pick up their suicidal thoughts, and we can respond the best way we can. Guyana is a very big country. It's a lot of terrain that is hard to access. So I see the way forward as more accessibility by services like telecounseling, and hopefully Caribbean Voice can take that up and make it something that's going to happen for the benefit of persons way out in the districts that can't reach to the city or to those areas where counseling is physically available. Those are my initial thoughts. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for sharing. You know, one of the things that's common among what our professionals have shared in this forum this afternoon is that the hotline is something that works, and the counseling is something that also works. And so what I would like to do is to pass the baton back to Mr. Brother Anam, and my co-hosts will engage you in some other ways to help us to either reignite or to discover some additional ways in which we can build our skills and our education base, and what it is that we need to do to help to prevent, to reduce, to prevent, to eliminate suicide in our Caribbean communities.
Thank you, Claudette. Let's start with Shani. Question,
Okay.
comment, contribution.
I have a question. I loved hearing everything about what's been going on in you guys' regions, what has been improvements that you have been focusing on, and what has been done. I wanted to raise the question, what can be improved and or what can be changed? Because I've heard a lot about what has been done, but I just want to know a little bit about how we can progress further, or if there's anything that can be changed in the future to, really minimize this issue of suicide in the Caribbean. I wanted to raise this to specifically Dr. Sharma, but anyone could go, because I heard that Guyana is having one of the leading rates. So if you wanted to jump on that, that would be great.
Thank you very much. Is that okay, Joy? I can take the response. So we're in Guyana doing a lot more than was being done in the past. We're seeing changes now through our NGOs. As I said, they have taken up the baton and they're running with it. Caribbean Voice has just finished a training workshop for gatekeepers in what they call the hotspot area. And Guyana, we know, has several hotspot areas. So we have to build our capacity in those areas for response. It's very rewarding to hear of that program that's been done through the Adolescent Health Unit, where they're going out into the school and actively moving forward. They're not just waiting for people to come out and call the helpline. They're actually going out there, talking to the young people, talking in a language that they understand and know. And just today, the Mental Health Unit launched a social media platform where they're able now to connect our young people and persons with thoughts of harming themselves by media, because everybody is using the media. So we got to use the tools that are current, that modern. There's a big thing that I need to see change in my country, which is relationships and family are devastatingly bad. It's destructive. The dynamics are poor. The communications are poor. The hostility that exists is very high. Fathers are not taking up their responsibilities. There's a lot of alcohol use. There's a lot of infidelity. It's affecting the moms, who are really the powerhouses of the home. It's a tragedy in itself. And I think some of that is a fallout to what we see. I just saw a young lady, she's 13 years old, came to my practice where the mom was very worried about her because she stopped talking. And when I asked what's happening, she said her father said, don't think of me as your father anymore because I've got a new person in my life and she doesn't want my old family to be there. And that's absolutely ghastly. It's just unacceptable. But this is the kind of thing that seems to be very commonplace in our society. So I think changes at a societal level are very important. Thank you for that question.
Right. Before I go, Nari, you want to address your question to Dr. Sharma?
No, it was a general question.
All right, can I,
Go ahead.
my question is to Dr. Sharma, so can I go first?
Sure.
Dr. Sharma, you've said what you've said about all the issues relating to family, and that needs to be addressed. My question is this. In the context of Guyana's social landscape, political, economic realities, how specifically can we go about addressing that issue? What mechanisms need to be in place? What personnel need to be in place? What approaches need to be used?
Very good question. You're talking about the political landscape, which is a significant issue in Guyana. It doesn't help the social life when political parties have animosity. So there will be differences, and politicians need to grow up and learn that you're setting an example for young people. It's not acceptable to have that kind of level of hostility where you're calling on people to be disrespectful to each other on the streets, through protests. We need to move away from this. We need to advocate our policies. We need to be voted in because of what we can offer, but we don't need to be petty-minded and childish. And politicians have to grow up, or the system has to change where it must teach the politicians to behave better. You are our administrators, our managers, our leaders. Carry yourselves well. You can't expect a child to grow up in a home where the parents are behaving badly and come out of that in a healthy way. So we must address these issues. I'm glad you brought this up because we seem to be shy to call it for what it is. It is not acceptable. We're the people voting people in. Behave well, conduct yourself well, carry yourself well. Talk to each other. Whatever it takes, communication is critical. There's no need for us to fight as a people. We may be racially, ethnically, culturally different, but we're one people. Guyanese have always been very strong as people with the same values. Whatever families we come from, we carry the same feelings, we carry the same joys, with hopes, aspirations. Let it be common across the board. Let our politicians start with an example of being able to communicate well. Their lives are 5 years and they could be voted back in or out. So talk to each other. You gotta be able to communicate well. And I think somebody said communicate, Dr. Barnaby said, communication is a critical thing. And it's not communication to be expected of a child in a home that's dysfunctional. So you can't have good communication, Mr. Boodram, in a country where our leadership is dysfunctional. So it must be communication that's healthy, positive, progressive, not adversarial. You can have differences of opinion, but not at the level where we're starting to call out people to be aggressive to each other because of different political views. Not right, not in this day and age.
I'm sorry,
Not in any
Nani.
country.
I just have a follow-up. Well, not a follow-up, I just wanted, if anybody else wants to comment on that specific issue about family dysfunctions
So I would
I'd
like
like
to
to
just,
make, I would like to make a small comment.
Dr. Margaret first, and then Dr. Lorraine, you will be next.
all right.
Is that okay?
Thank you for that, Dr. Sharma. I just want to piggyback on what Dr. Sharma was saying. And he was talking about the involvement of governments who would possibly strengthen families and so on. That is idealistic because what we have seen so far in the Caribbean as regards Caribbean governments and so, many of their advocacies have been for economic concerns and financial stabilities. And so, whilst the issue is very important, I think we have to look towards our foot soldiers or NGOs, because one of the main things that we need and we see happening is that we need to increase the resilience of our children and our young people in families. We need to have, especially we have had an increase in suicide among children and adolescents over the last 2 years. And what is happening is that many of them have been socially isolated. We know that is a big no-no for young people, where their peer groups, their social hubs are at the core of what they do. This social isolation and school alienation has increased a lot of mental health challenges. What I would propose, therefore, is that since the media is a way where we reach our children, we have to have a lot of digital interventions that would increase or provide evidence-based interventions to reach our young people, to reappraise their thoughts. And it has to come through the schools, the teachers, and those who administer a lot of the things. And for a very long time, I've been saying that homes have already neglected their responsibilities. Now with this pandemic, we have put increased responsibilities on people who have neglected their responsibilities. So you could imagine the fallout on the children within these homes. We need to have lots of foot soldiers on the ground, mobile, going into rural areas, because just a look this morning at our own statistics, a lot of the suicides are happening in our underserved and neglected areas within the communities. And this pandemic has exacerbated that because there is no recourse now to them to come into schools or come into forums where they can get meals or their children can access teachers who can listen. And so whilst the ideal is for our governments to really be more proactive, we know that is not going to happen in the short term. In the short term, we need our NGOs, we need our foot soldiers, we need more advocacy for our homes and more training. People, I think somebody spoke about gatekeepers. We need more training of persons who can intervene in areas where it is crucial for these things to happen, to build capacity within these homes. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Margaret. Dr. Lorraine had wanted
Right,
to say.
thank you. Okay, I would like to address Dr. Sharma's comment regarding family, and I also want to touch on the racial, cultural things. Now, I just want to remind us all that the slogan for this year's World Suicide Prevention Day is creating hope through action.
Yes.
And so I believe that one of the things that could result from our, not just this meeting, but other meetings as we continue to plan for the future and try to work towards achieving the 2030 WHO goals for suicide prevention, that we first of all look at their guidelines for suicide prevention, and then I'm going to talk about Dr. Sharma's comments. Now, remember that they said we must limit access to means of suicide. That's one of the guidelines, and of course we know that within the region you have the pesticide issue. We also have an issue of alcoholism and other drugs. We need to do that. Although in Jamaica, suicide by hanging and also by the gun, those are kind of important ones. Interaction with the media for responsible reporting of suicide. This is looking at the fact that sometimes the media, and I mean print as well as electronic media, they hype the suicide. They put pictures of the person or the house or the car or the whatever it is, and that is not responsible. So that part of what we do should be to try and encourage the various media within our region to take these things off the front page and to even use discretion in how they report, not to talk about method and so forth. To foster socio-economic life skills in adolescents. This is highlighting what we know, that our adolescent persons are at risk. And I do remember hearing Dr. Sharma talking about this, and this being an important area within the Ghanaian situation. And the last one that I want to talk about here, it's a multi-pronged one. It says that we should identify early, we should assess, manage, and follow up on anyone who is affected by suicidal behaviors. Now, that does not mean only the person who is showing the behavior or having the ideation, but it looks at family. Now, in regard to family, let me come right down to Dr. Sharma's comment. We do know that as part of the whole history of colonization and slavery and so on, that after the abolition, persons were brought from India initially, and then some from China, but we had the indentured persons who came from India, and it is because they came more to the Trinidadian area and to the Ghanaian area, although we have persons in all the territories who are from India, but the culture was such that at the moment we have probably in Ghana and Trinidad, we have almost equal. I'm not being very scientific here, but almost equal numbers of Black and Indian persons, whereas in Jamaica, we have predominantly Black, maybe 90% Black, and the Indian persons are very low. And I believe, excuse me, that cultural difference, excuse me, sorry, that cultural difference is very important, because not only does it create political issues, but because of how families are, and you correct me if I'm wrong, that the traditions of the Indian family include parents selecting their children's like husband or wife. And if let's say a girl, if she wants to get involved with a person who is outside of that ethnic group, it can create problems. And I've heard about girls who have these romantic attachments which are frowned upon by the family, and sometimes this results in suicidal behavior, suicide pacts, and so on. And within the Trinidadian situation, it is sometimes the same kind of thing, that they encourage the traditional approach. And it is perhaps because in Jamaica, the Indian population is highly assimilated into the rest of the population, highly assimilated into the Black population of Jamaica, for example, that we don't see this. I mean, I know of couples who are one Indian and one Black, and they seem to get along okay, and the family was not pushing either the fellow or the girl to remain close to tradition. And so culture is an area that I think we need to look at, and we need to look at it not to discount it, not to disregard it, because I think along with culture, you have positive aspects as well as some things that maybe could be tweaked. And more attention needs to be paid to that, because I believe within Ghana and within Trinidad and Tobago, within Suriname, that between culture and substance use and the racial mix, and then when you add in some of the environmental and social aspects, it creates a very nice cauldron for there to be various types of psychiatric problems, including depressive disorders, low self-esteem, problems with body dysmorphic disorder, and so on, which might end up with suicide. So if we can deal with that, just include culture into it. And Dr. Sharma did mention it, and I think it was a very important thing for him to mention. That was very long, but I thank you for listening.
Maybe what you raised there, Dr. Barnaby, is something we can use as a topic for another one of these sessions for culture per se. Nadi, I just want to add one thing before you come on. Dr. Barnaby mentioned the WHO goal for suicide prevention. WHO is committed to reducing suicides across the world by 1/3 minimum by 2030. That's the goal she was referring to. Over to you, Nadi.
Hello, everyone. So, but I just wanted to say that this is such a great discussion, by the way. You know, the panel is only as effective as the information we're able to give out to hopefully the people that are listening that are probably in situations where they're looking for some assistance, right? And not able to access it. I want to say, I'm going to touch on a lot of things that were already spoken about, but I didn't hear anyone mention self-love, self-care, self-worth, right? I come from Ghana. I was a child there. And I would say that I came from a very typical Indian family. And what Dr. Barnaby spoke about, and Dr. Margaret and Dr. Sharma, is so on point. I wanted to talk about what, if any ideas or if anything is being done to get to the root of why people, especially younger people, find themselves feeling so unworthy and hopeless. Where is the communication within the family? And Dr. Barnaby hit on something that is crucial. I don't know what the actual statistics are in terms of suicide rates. I'm just going to use Guyana. How much of that 40-something% are from Indian ethnicity, right? I'd be curious to know that if somebody had that information. But what I wanted to talk about is the pressures that young people are put in from the moment they're born into these families. I've left Ghana a very long time ago, but I remember the pressure of how, if you didn't get 16, GCE and CXE, you were not as worthy. The racial and religious sort of divisions that live there are very, very deep. That Dr. Barnaby spoke about, the stigmas attached to homosexuality, those kind of societal grievances, that those are the disorders that I believe, in my humble opinion, if you guys can talk about it, what are we doing about infiltrating the way families are thinking about themselves and how they're raising these young people? And then when the young people are faced with these issues, they have no place to go. Their back is against the wall. Unless you come from money and you can afford counseling, where do you go? And then, of course, the shame that's attached to it. I know I'm saying a lot of things. If you guys can just talk a little bit about how do we get to the root of why people are feeling so hopeless, please. Thank you.
Dr. Margaret, since I think this is something you're dealing with right now, do you want to jump in first?
Yes. So thanks a lot, Nadi, for your question. I want to talk and link it to what I see and what I've observed over the years as the lack of the attachment bond, the severing of the attachment bond in families. I know that Paho and ISP spoke to the third link in suicide prevention, and which is to foster the socio-emotional life skills in adolescents. We know that a lot of the problems in adulthood stem from problems in childhood. And the unfortunate thing is that people begin to address, as Dr. Barnaby said, all of the depressive issues, all of these things in adulthood, when really it started in childhood. And one of the things that I've always spoken about, especially at Parliament level, is that we need to put more resources into children, into adolescents, into identifying early o'clock what are the adverse childhood experiences that they have. Don't wait until secondary school even. Put the resources there, because you ask the question, why is there this sort of disconnect, Nadi? Why is there that people no longer feel as if they have self-esteem or worth or value? And it stems from being disconnected or not feeling that sense of belonging in families. I just want to touch a little bit on this attachment bond. We know that this begins from the moment a child is born. Whether or not they feel connected to families, whether they feel loved, whether they feel a sense of worth, and all of that is communicated by the caregiver. Doesn't matter if it's mother or father or tanty or granny, that feeling that you are needed, that you are wanted, that you are supported. And if there is that disconnect, let me tell you, early o'clock from 7, 8, 9, if there is that disconnect, children, especially with the advent of social media and seeing all of what is happening globally there, they begin to harbor thoughts They begin to go to dark places. They begin to feel that they're unloved. Nobody supports them, especially when caregivers compare them to family members or compare them to those who are more successful. Because as you would all know, there's an emphasis in our society, and that is why I told Dr. Sharma that it's idealistic for the government because they're not going to focus on this. There is an emphasis in our society that the better, the more pretty you look, or those outward attributes and how successful you are, the home you live in, the car, and they do not get to the affective or the emotional qualities of the child. And that is why I said from the beginning of my conversation, we have to increase that resilience within our children, within our young people, if we have to stem this pandemic. So we always think of what's a huge thing we're looking at. We have to get back into the families, get back into the children, get back into that sense of belonging, that they are needed, that they are loved, and that they are wanted. Thank you.
Fabian has to leave us soon because he has to go prepare for a panel discussion they have in Barbados following this one. So I'm going to ask Fabian at this point if there's any contribution you want to make, so with respect to what has been discussed recently.
Yes, just to touch on the last point there. I mean, there's a lot of discussion about the family and so forth. And there's a saying which goes, if you cannot be doing the same thing and expecting different results. We exist in a different environment, a different type of socialization. Young people are more technologically inclined. Due to COVID, they're a lot less social physically. And so parents who create that environment, because behavior is influenced heavily by the environment, they're the ones who have to shape that environment. Unfortunately, a number of these parents do not have the contemporary skills based on the new environment. They continue to parent based on the old way and what they know. I mean, which is normal, but it's like standing in a bucket and trying to lift it. It's a very difficult situation, but we have to find ways to really adjust to this new type of environment that young people are existing, and find new ways of parenting. And I'm a big advocate of a national parenting program, particularly here in Barbados. But earlier I wanted to ask a question. It was mentioned about having foot soldiers in communities, and in a country like Guyana, where suicide is so prevalent. In Barbados, I mean, it is not that heavy here, and I'm hoping that it don't ever get to that stage. But how has the COVID environment really impacted the response? Because you speak about having people on the ground going into communities, and with the limited, your mobilizing is much limited. No, you shouldn't really be going around people, going into homes. How has that really impacted the response to suicide prevention programs, particularly in those countries that have like Guyana, Trinidad, and so on?
Well, speaking from the point of view of the Caribbean Voice, we're different in the sense that we don't have those foot soldiers on the ground. We just have small amounts of people, but stuff can be done. The problem is that COVID has indeed stymied to a sort of significant level what you can do, especially if it has to be live face-to-face kind of situations. And training, especially with respect to suicide prevention, is not as effective if you do it virtually. At least that's our experience, than if you do it in a live setting. So the other thing I think is that COVID and all its concomitants has focused resources on that and the related issues. And therefore, even if there were resources that were focusing on suicide prevention in the first place, which would have been minimal, those resources are no longer available because in the eyes of whoever, they're more important where the COVID and its concomitants are concerned. I don't know if anybody has anything different or even something to add to what I said.
I think from what Fabian is asking about Guyana, and the COVID crisis. It's a lot of emotional problems that have resulted from the COVID crisis, the shutdown. There's fear, there's loss of jobs, there's a fear of infection and death, fear of spread, there's fear in the hospital settings. The numbers are high. The country itself is fearful about the rise in the numbers. So it's ongoing. So it's a drain. Chronic stress, as you know, is worse than acute stress in the sense it's a drain on the person's emotional life. But the response has been pretty positive. People are trying their best. Guyana has a lot of positives about it in terms of economy is moving upwards. The NGOs are strong. They're doing their bit. I wanted to just comment about the family here in Guyana. Just moving a little bit off what was asked by Fabian. I want to come back to you, Fabian, about that national parenting thing. I'm not sure if you're still here, but that is so wonderful if we can have those kind of programs, because the families in Guyana, I find, are very dysfunctional at all levels. They can pretend a lot. There's a lot of pretense in the way people behave. To look good is important. So for your kids to have those large number of subjects is important. At what price they're getting it to my days, to get 9 subjects was amazingly good. Now it's like 25 subjects. Where are these kids finding time for a social life? What are their social life all about? Kids are now not able to go into play. They're all on the phones and cell phones. It's a cell phone era. That's not itself very healthy. But on top of that, we have families, as rightly Dr. Barnaby says, very dysfunctional. I have to say, in terms of the numbers, we're seeing more suicide in our East Indian population. And I believe the pressure on that particular ethnic group is very, very high. The throwback to the days from coming over to Guyana way back in time, and behaviors have not changed. A lot of alcoholism in the families. Abuse and lack of communication, extremely high here. And another huge problem is this early relationship that the young people are getting into. It's almost like acceptable to an obscene point where young people at the age of 40, not so much arranged marriages now, Dr. Barnaby, but more an acceptance that our young daughter of 14, 13 would have a committed relationship at that age. And that's one of the big reasons we see in the young people attempted and committed suicide, mostly because of relationship breakups. And as they grow older, the boy moves on to another relationship. The girls are going on to suicidal behavior because of that. And then, of course, the family is not accepting somebody of a different ethnicity, culture, or even class, you know. So there's lots of hidden dynamics that are very hard to fix. It's hard enough, as Dr. Margaret said, about fixing the politicians. What about fixing the families? And I believe getting a national parental training program where parents learn parental skills, extremely important. And the other thing I believe that's important is the accountability that people must have in our country. And this is at all levels. I'm still very hopeful that we can hold politicians to better behavior by showing them that they are accountable to the people.
Very quickly, 2 experiences I had over the last month or so to kind of support what Dr. Sharma is saying. 3 weeks ago, I got a call at about 10 o'clock in the night from a young lady from Puerto Rico. She was going to immediately take her life. Somehow she got on our phone and she called me. Why she wanted to do that? Because her family doesn't care about her. In a nutshell, there were all sorts of issues. But as it turned out, it was more of an impulsive, spontaneous thing than anything else. And that spontaneity and impulsivity, I think, I may be wrong, please correct me, does characterize young people to a far greater extent. How that plays into suicidality itself, I don't know. The other experience today, I spoke with a she's not young, she's in her 40s, wanted to take her life because a relationship, boyfriend, girlfriend, they were not married or anything, of about 12 years had suddenly been ended by the mail. And so she felt lost and she felt extremely lonely and she didn't know where to turn to. And so she thought taking her life would have been the answer. Fortunately, we were able to address that also. So in terms of young people and these emotive or emotional kind of things, even people who are not so young, 40s, maybe 50s fall, you know. Where are the coping skills and where are the capacity to deal with challenge? And especially with young people, those are the two things that we found in the Caribbean Voice working with people, that the coping skills are not there and the capacity to address challenges are not there. Before I open to anybody else, I want to welcome Pandit Devdutt Prasad. As I had said earlier, he had something else to do, but he's here with us now. Panditji, would you like to introduce yourself? He's on mute. We'll get to him. Anybody wants to? Oh, okay.
Good evening to everyone and namaste, and of course, my apologies to for not being here on time. I think over the years, and I'm happy that your organization, our organization, somewhere or the other, regardless of how small it's being done, there is an awareness, and I think the fact that there has over the years when we have started to do suicide as wearing awareness, this conversation was almost taboo. Persons were uncomfortable with it, and it seemed only relevant to a certain section of society. But over the years, I think because of the consistency and the continuous effort that have been made, today we can talk about suicide, and we can also we have over the years not only stopped at talking and making it seem as if it's just a discussion for a few, but over the years we can somewhere or the other we've reached a stage where I think comfortably so we can all measure the impact that we have been created, whether it's in small ways or the other, but we have to also not that we want to take credit, but not that we should be taking credit or so, but at sometimes also so we have to recognize that when I know the tagline once is that suicide is everybody's business, the tagline is still relevant. And I believe that it is voices like yours. We have like about 9 other participants in this room here. I think it is our continuous and consistent effort that is making this issue stay alive, because we are from a society where issues die very quickly, and issues simply make us for agenda when it's when there are recurrences. And fortunate for us, I think over the years there has been a decline of suicide, but the decline does not say much if we still even have one person dying from suicide, because I still believe that one is still too much. And given the pandemic, only up to I think this midday I was reading, and I want to of course commend Massy organization. I saw that they're going to be doing some investments as it regards to mental health and suicide. And I'm thinking, you know what, this is so good if other corporate organizations could come on board, because we all will have to agree, and studies have shown that this pandemic, it has really impacted on people's mental health. And while we're not seeing immediately a sort of springboard from that, I'm very cautious about what the future has in store, because we're still in it and it's not going to end very soon.
All right, guys, let's see hands in terms of who wants to jump in.
I have a question I would like to raise.
Have we exhausted responses to everything that Nadi raised? Anybody else wants to jump in on that?
I wanted to make a comment, but I don't know if the young lady has something related to it. I would wait.
You can go if you want. It was related to the topic. It was more about trying to reach the people at home because we were talking about familial situations with the youth. And I wanted to kind of raise the question about what are the warning signs for the people and the viewers watching so that they can identify it within their friend groups and their communities to make sure that we can, stop this and plateau this curve.
Okay.
Dr. Barnaby, you can combine both then. Response to.
I will try, yes. In respect of the this thing about how we're going to reach people, we have a slogan that says, "You are not alone." And it's trying to indicate, yes, you're not alone, that there are other people who maybe share your sense of feeling isolated, but it's also to destigmatize, because it goes on to say many persons struggle with, and it says addictive behaviors, anxiety, bipolar, eating disorders, depression, schizophrenia. And it has a picture of a girl on it, a little girl with two plaits. So it's recognizing that girls are more willing to talk about psychological issues more so than boys, but that these issues occur with suicidal ideation and suicidal behavior in young girls, even though they may not in the end utilize a very lethal method, so that it ends up with boys using more lethal methods and dying because of the kind of method. But I wanted to also indicate that if you do have a kind of a macro and micro approach, where you look at societal things and you look at things within the family, then you're going to be able in the long term to create a change, because you're not going to be able to change people's outlook on life tomorrow or in 2 days, but over time and with public education campaigns, and you add to those things like a direct outreach, a kind of community outreach, where you're going from community to community, utilizing movies or other things, and to get people to see what you're driving at. Just as how you're trying to educate people to take vaccine, some kind of approach like that. But what are some of the warning signs? You were asking about warning signs. If I try to limit it to the young person, I'll say that one of the first things you look for is a change of behavior. The change may be either withdrawal, they go more into themselves, or it could be the opposite, that they start acting out. The change could be that the schoolwork deteriorates, or they're spending more time doing games on the computer or on the cell phone or whatever it is. They're talking to their friends and staying up half the night doing all of that instead of applying themselves to work that needs to be done. So putting off things, procrastination, and doing stuff that's more or less strange if you know the person well enough. That's a clue. The next thing that you might notice, and they don't come in order, they can come any time, anyhow. Signs of anxiety and stress, signs of depression. Again, maybe you see withdrawal, you see that they're not paying attention to what they wear, or maybe they're eating a lot of things that's not good for them, and they're putting on weight, and then they start to get body image disturbance. There's a whole lot of things that happen, but it does require for people to be attentive. Notice change. You see, if you can spot change, and if you can communicate with the person without being judgmental. You don't say, but I see you looking fat, man, or what happened to you? Things that would make the person more or less feel more embarrassed than be willing to talk. But we do have something that I think in Jamaica, it's a combination of the UNICEF and the Ministry of Health and Wellness. They have a joint initiative called You Report. I don't know if you have it in Trinidad and in Barbados. It's a social messaging tool called You Report, and they can access it and they can talk on it. They can use any of the social media, they call it Facebook and Twitter, is that? Yeah, Twitter and so forth, Instagram to do it. And they can message into it and get messages out of it. That's another way to get people to talk. And it's a thing that young people probably would feel more happy about than a big person like me. I'm not so familiar with those things. So you look for change in behavior, you look for signs of sleep problems, appetite problems, either too much or too little. You look for maybe some reckless behavior too. You look for cutting, especially girls do that. You see them talking about their feelings about themselves and voicing ideas. If you hear somebody talking about they want to give up, or they don't feel hopeful, or that you must take it seriously. When a person talks about things like relating to death, you must take it seriously and don't think that you must tell them, oh man, cheer up, man, chin up. That does not help. And I also say, put it in a social context. Did somebody lose an important relationship, or a person who died from COVID or got into an accident? Look at the situation, or have a financial loss, depending on the age and so forth, because those things can affect people. So you have to look at the whole thing, look for change and look for the whole situation, and then be prepared. Sometimes you're going to have to listen to a very long story, but you have to sit and listen carefully to what is being said. Okay, so I thank you for that opportunity.
Before I saw Nadi hands, but before Nadi, come on, Shani, you have any follow-up to that?
No, that was just beautifully said. It was very articulate, and it really just encapsulated everything I wanted to hear, especially for the viewers at home. Just being able to know that there are things you can do. There are people that you can turn to if you are having those tendencies and having those thoughts. And if you aren't having those thoughts, you need to be able to look to the people around you, because there are warning signs that people will show if you know them enough, and just to hold on to those. And I really love what you said about when people have dark statements or really morbid statements about themselves and their lives, not brushing it off and really taking it into account. Especially now in the US, since I am in school, I hear a lot with students is dark humor. People will make jokes about death, about killing themselves. And when you turn to them and you ask them, why would you say that? They can't really give a really great answer, because it's just in their head that this is something that they would do, but to cover it up in almost like a blanket of comfort and make it seem less intense, when in reality, it's just a really morbid, sad statement. But what you said was beautiful, and you were going to turn it to Miss
Nadi.
Prasad, right? Yes. All right,
I'm
thank you.
sorry. I
Nadi,
just thought
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Dr. Dawn Stewart just joined us. So can you call on her to introduce herself? Go ahead.
Got it. Oh, Dr. Stewart, how are you?
I can hardly hear you. Good night. I'm not having a very good connection. Good night to everyone. I don't know if you could hear me, but I can't hear you.
Yes, we're hearing you.
She can't hear us.
She's muted. Maybe that's why.
No, I'm not muted. I just can't,
No.
there's no sound. We're having some trouble with the internet and I'm not getting any sound. The quality is not as good. I don't know how well you could hear me, but I am not hearing you at all. I can see your lips moving, but I'm not hearing you.
You sound very clear.
Yes,
You're
we're hearing you
visible
clearly.
channel.
So,
Oh, I'm gonna
Archmadi-
log off and try to log back on again.
okay. All right, Nadi, go ahead.
So just to kind of elaborate a little bit, I think my question originally was in terms of the family and changing that culture that I think is probably the root of where a lot of the self-worth and esteem and high expectations, unrealistic expectations, and no place to communicate that. I think everybody established that, but I'm trying to ask, how do we begin to change? Yes, medical professionals can try to speak to parents, but on a grander scale, how do we begin to get parents, people at home, family members to open up those lines of communication and begin to change the culture? I still haven't, we've identified what the issues are, but I would love to hear if there are any ideas, like Dr. Sharma, for instance, I'm going to go to Guyana because it's just a place that's familiar. How do we begin to teach Indian families that to kind of dilute some of the racism, some of the appropriate relationships? You spoke about that. As doctors, you guys know better than anybody that there are adolescents, people that are 13, 14, 15 years old are going through lots of hormonal changes, but families really shame them for a lot of that, right? And the desperation that comes from those relationships, like we touched on, when a relationship breaks up, people don't know how to cope. It's because a part of it is because so much emphasis is placed on you must date one person or not even date, arranged with one person. When we deem that to be, when you're done with your education, when we deem that appropriate, and ignoring all the years in between where boys and girls are feeling lots of things sexually that they don't know what to do with. If a girl, an Indian girl, is talking to some boy, God forbid it's from a different race or religion, that's a whole nother story. They are completely stigmatized. They are told all kinds of horrible things and called names. And how do we begin to change this understanding and equality with girls? There's a very big difference. That boys can do many things, but girls can't, and that puts so much pressure on them.
If I can jump in here, two things. First of all, I think a number of policies, plans, whatever you want to call them, were adumbrated. A national campaign to teach parenting skills and to address functional relationship is one way to go. Of course, NGOs would not have the capacity for that, so it obviously has to come from the government. Dr. Margaret talked about implementing programs in schools to address the psychosocial issues that young people face, and those programs can also incorporate these other issues. Somebody else said something, I don't remember. So those are some of the, I'm sure there were a few others, but I don't remember. But we want to stay with the topic of preventing suicide. The issues you're asking are really, really good, but the more forge off into the mental health, which we can address in a separate panel discussion. A discussion this one we really want to come up with the strategies, tactics, plans, programs that are practical within the context of the Caribbean and that can help to address suicide. But before we get back to that, if anybody wants to speak directly to the concerns raised by Nadi, put your hand up. All right, I saw
Claudette had a hand up.
all right, Doc, go ahead.
Claudette, I know I said Claudette had her hand up.
Yeah,
Yes, but
I don't
go
know if
ahead
you,
and speak, Dr. Margaret. I'll speak after you have had an opportunity to share.
Okay, I know that Anand had said that he wants to sort of just bring the topic back to prevention of suicide. And one of the main things that I think we sort of overlook is that what the ISP and other organizations had brought forward, and I think Lorraine mentioned it, limiting the access to the means of suicide, making households aware that if there are persons who are at risk, who have expressed suicidal ideation, if we are seeing warning signs, red flags, etc., we have to be very careful, especially with children, to limit access to the means of suicide. In Trinidad, one of the main ways of young people, males, boys, taking their lives is just by the belt, you know, the belt that they have and skipping rope and things like that. So, and while that is something that people may overlook, that is a lethal tool in the hands of someone who has in his or her mind to take their life. So I would just like, when we're looking at prevention of suicide, to highlight some of these things. And again, key to all of this is the kinds of programs. I know people have spoken about parenting programs, but we have to have these public awareness programs of things that people take lightly, things that people overlook in their homes. So I just want to let us sort of zero in on what can possibly happen in the short term to look at this issue.
got it.
I want to thank Dr. Lorraine for mentioning the goals, the WHO goals around suicide prevention. And the third one she mentioned was that fostering social life skills in adolescence. And for me, that begs the question, and maybe you can help to answer that. Does this include incorporating spiritual laws and practices and how they affect our lives? And I'm not speaking about religion. I'm talking about spiritual laws and practices incorporated into fostering social life skills.
Can you give an example of a spiritual law or practice that you?
Well, one of the things that I've heard in this setting and in other settings around people who have the thoughts of doing suicide is that there's no hope. And where does hope? I've heard the talk about self-esteem. Where does that spiritual love, understanding that you're a spiritual being and that you come with that love, for example, that crosses all religious lines, that crosses all ethnic lines, that crosses so many of these things that make us feel that we're less than and that we can just take our lives because, there's no hope. Am I making sense?
Yes, you are. When you're finished, I'd like to address it.
I'm finished with the question.
Okay, I'll address it on 3 levels. One, to say that the young lady who started to speak about dealing with family and things to do with self-esteem and so on, these are very important basic things that we have to find a way to address. It's not outside the realm of prevention, but it's just that it's going to take longer to achieve. And that we need to look at PTAs as another area where you can get adults and teachers trying to come to the same point of belief about how to tackle this thing. Now, I think that the spiritual aspect is a very important aspect. Giving your example and even making it a bit wider, because that thing of hope is what you hold on to. Hope is what allows you, the individual who may be feeling particularly distressed, it will give you the chance to hold on for the next day and the next day and the next day. So it is very important to inculcate spiritual values and as you said, not religious per se, but spiritual. And these things cut across various religions. They cut across because you can get this information, get this belief in yourself and in the power of persons outside of your actual circle. Because remember that, well, in my system, there are people who help, and they help because of some divine thing that happens, that they are there for when you need it. And I think that's across the board, anything. Plus religion and spirituality are protective factors. So when you're looking at coping mechanisms, you have to put that into. And there's an instrument called the SAFE, SAFE, and the letter T. And it looks at risk factors for suicide and protective factors. And within the protective factors, you put religion and spirituality, you put social support and things of that nature that will help you to get that sense of belonging, sense of hope, sense of you're not alone. There is hope and help for you. And there's something that Margaret was saying, with the things that I had a little comment to make about it, but I'm not remembering what it is now, so I'm going to just leave it, and it might come back to me later. Thanks.
A follow-up question, Doc. Okay, so the
Yes.
mechanism to build that hope from a spiritual standpoint, does that become something that is the onus of the individual, or is it incorporating the religious entities, churches, etc., into this process? How does that work?
Well, you know what, I think there's a very individual one-to-one part to it. It might also involve others, but there's a one-to-one part. For example, if suppose somebody came within my orbit and they're having, okay, let me put it to a work situation. I work in correctional services. A lot of the times the children, they just come into the place and they feel strange and they're wondering why are they there and so forth. And some of them are frankly talking about suicide. So we have to put them on suicide watch, and we take away, I remember what it is now, the thing to do with methods. You have to remove things that they could use to hang themselves. You have to remove, sometimes you see, I think it's a pretty terrible system that they have, but they take out the sheet, they take out any kind of clothing that you could put around your neck and so forth. So, and they observe the person. So, but the thing is, if you don't do it, the person may destroy themselves. But you have to link it up with talking to them, giving them that sense of hope. Since I'm Christian, I usually talk about God in it, but I actually talk about Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. I talk about all when I say the Spirit, the Holy Spirit, and you can tell me if I'm wrong to approach it that way, but I have done so time and time again. You talk about the Spirit as a spirit, and I bring in the thing about the footprints in the sand, and when it's only one set, you're being cradled in the arms of you know, like a protector, a guide, a support, God, Father and Son and Spirit. But the thing that I wanted to talk to Margaret about is that in respect of method, it is one thing to be able to remove pesticides from houses, or to do what they do in some countries, which they have the lockbox for all of the farmers to have just one key to open the places that keep the pesticides. But the thing is that we are surrounded by cords and ropes, and I mean, I'm looking at my patio here, you know, and I see a hair dryer with a cord. The thing that the thing is plugged into has a cord. And it's very hard to decrease those things, the various implements, the various mechanisms by which you can hang yourself. Even stockings can do it. And I remember this was a topic that was discussed at the first Caribbean Regional Symposium, which was held in Suriname. We talked about the ones that we really can do something about, like guns and pesticides and other things. But we also brought up the fact that it's very hard to remove every piece of rope and cord. It's hard to prevent us from going into the sea and drowning ourselves, or going into the water tank, because these things are around and they're part of our everyday lives. And so we have to look at those things that we can do, and look at those other things which would be more difficult. In the prison system, they talk about removing anything that you can hang anything on. So they have redesigned some prisons, not in Jamaica, but in America and other places, so that you can't hang it on anything. But in Jamaica, we still have the old time metal bars and so on. You can hang yourself. And the unfortunate thing is that the young girls, they're in the old adult prison. They have cells. It's very not good for the girls. These are teenagers, you know, these are children, 13, 14, 15, 16, they stop at 18. They have to, they go home at 18. And so it's not easy, which is why the mechanism, the suicide watch thing is so drastic. Because I usually say, but what if it gets cold? How do you manage if it's cold? Because the children will be at a disadvantage, and I don't get any answer. But I hope I've dealt with the three issues. Thanks.
Thank you, Lorraine. I saw Margaret's hand, but I just want to go back to Nadi quickly. So they say incorporation of the spiritual component, schools and PTAs, national campaigns to address to provide parenting skills and address dysfunctional relationships. Is there something more you were looking for, Nadi, perhaps?
You're muted, Nadi.
I'm so sorry.
Yes.
I think I was looking for a more grassroots, organic type of approach, which may not be practical. I agree with Dr. Margaret that the government and government programs and campaigns are probably not the most effective. There's so much information that families have access to through, just their computers. But the culture is so ingrained and so deep that I have no ideas. I was hoping that Dr. Sharma maybe can comment on some of that stuff that he sees a lot of in Trinidad and in Guyana, those kind of where there's a lot of Indian population. Sorry, go ahead, Dr. Sharma.
Yeah, thanks, Nadi. I was kind of sitting back and listening to Dr. Barnaby. She's always very eloquent. passionate about this. But also there are other people I'd like to also hear. But thank you for asking me, because this is something of a passion of mine, especially the issues of young people and how they're being affected by so many negative forces. And I think it's something that's very relevant to what's happening for young people committing suicide in Guyana. The suicide is of the young people, the younger population. It's a reverse to what we see in other areas of the world. The biggest numbers of suicide occur in Northern Europe, whereas the Caribbean and the Americas have the lowest rate of suicides in the world. But yet in that pocket of people, Guyana has it is the highest rate. You know, some of the islands I've worked in, the rate is almost non-existent, 1, 0. But Barbados, as Fabian said, is very low. So why do we have our young people ending their lives, both young men and women, or young men? It's the biggest cause of death in the younger men, in the 16, the 19 age group. So it is a huge problem. And it is those factors, exactly what you say there, the cultural factors, the pressures on these kids. Why the East Indian kids are committing suicide more, because there's a lot of pressure on these kids. There's a lot of expectations, there's a lot of restrictions. And the restrictions are not only ethnic, the restrictions are also religious. So they got religion factors, not only in the East Indian community, it's true. It's in all the religions. I've had a young lady who told me that her boyfriend is not a particular religion in the Christian religious home, and the parents will not accept it. And she ended up attempting suicide. So she came to our attention at the private hospital. So there's a lot of biases, a lot of pressure on our young people. In terms of what can be done, there are things that can be done that are very positive. The role of drama reaches out well to children. They respond well. They respond well to humor. They respond well to that connection when they see people communicate. I heard one person at my group this evening that we presented at the suicide prevention talked about role plays. They do role plays when they go into the community. These people go down to the Barometer community, which is also a hotspot, and they actually demonstrate how to talk, or what happens when you don't talk well. What are the reactions people feel? What do they feel? People don't ask our kids, how are you feeling? You know, like you just sit there and you're feeling great, or you see them with a phone on their ear and you think they're doing well. Nobody comes in and talks to them. So it's communication. I think using the media, using plays, using drama, going out there, getting involved, using any mechanism. We got to reach our young people. They are a target group, and there are a lot of levels of negative pressures on them. Our homes are dysfunctional. Fathers are not there taking up the responsibilities. They hand it over to their mothers. They go about cheating on their wives. Not that other sexes don't cheat, but they are the major culprits. They're drinking all over the place. They have to be more held accountable. It's unacceptable. The point Fabian made is very important. National parenting programs. We got child protection units. Yes, it's looking at abuse, but how are we getting into that home? How will we be able to reach those people and change their mindset? It's very hard. It takes years to change cultural thinking and cultural patterns. Acculturation happens over years. But we are at a point, our people are growing more advanced. The world is more connected. It's getting more broad. We got to bring the conversation home. We can't hide from it. We can't brush it off. It is the critical issue. The way our people are behaving with each other, the way we communicate, the way we see our leaders communicate, the way our children are seeing the parents communicate, it's not good. It got to be addressed, whatever way. If it's through a drama, if it's through plays, we had a great play somebody put on in Guyana, where there is a lot of issues that were brought up that were in that play. It was well received. It was about cultural behaviors. It was neighbors who are of different race. Beautiful play. Those are the kind of things that need to be done more often. Get people to see them. Put it in. I think that play was converted to a movie. You know that one, right? And then it was somewhere about last year. I think they produced it, and extremely good. So that's the way I see it. Gotta take it on. Don't hide away from it. Jamaica, I've lived in Jamaica, had the pleasure of living in Jamaica, is an advanced society because the people are open, they're broad-minded. I don't think it's just about the Indian population be submerged. It's a multiracial society. People are able to communicate well. The attitudes are good. The acceptance of others are very good. I always love that about Jamaica. We need to get more of that in our country. We're too isolated, restricted, fragmented, and absolutely dysfunctional at many levels. It's got to stop. We got to change it. Don, you're back.
I
see.
saw Don, but just before Don comes on, but doesn't that take us back to the point that Margaret made, that we need the foot soldiers on the ground? And those foot soldiers essentially will come from community-based organizations and non-governmental organizations. But unless these organizations are provided with the resources and the skill sets, how are they going to be able to do the work?
Yeah, but Anand, it's not foot soldiers alone. You know, our foot soldiers going to go in somebody's home and tell them to behave better. It's got to be a mechanism of reaching those people using every modality, forums, social media. I go on radio and talk and people respond, they like it. So it's got to be an overwhelming mechanism to put people right. Your thinking is wrong. You cannot be prejudiced. It's non-acceptable.
Two things.
It's a holistic issue.
We just launched a gatekeepers training in Guyana, as you mentioned. The gatekeepers training, if it focuses on training gatekeepers within communities, those are the foot soldiers with the skills, the resources, and hopefully the time. But if Caribbean Voice was to do that throughout Guyana, let's say, for example, we don't have the financial resources. Any other organization would still need the financial resources and the logistical support to be able to do it. Another thing, Caribbean Voice strongly believes that you should not reinvent the wheel if what you can use is already out there. We have been agitating for the introduction in the Caribbean of the Friendship Bench. The Friendship Bench was introduced in Zimbabwe, and it's now across the world, being used across the world, including the United States. What do? They take the people with the time, the grandparents, especially the grandmothers. They train them in talk therapy. They set up benches within communities across the country. People are made aware that if you want to talk to somebody, these are the people you can talk to. They will let people know, or they will go and sit there and wait, or they will let people know that we are available at such and such time. They go to the benches. Anybody who wants to talk goes to the bench, talk with them. They train in talk therapy, so at least they have a certain level of communication skills. But it is the government, or it is organizations with the capacity to be able to harness that kind of thing to get it done. So it's not, in my view, in the view of the Caribbean Voice, it's not that there are not mechanisms that you're referring to out there. It goes back to political will, and Margaret already talked about that. That doesn't seem to be there to the extent that it's needed. So how do you get the people with the resources, which would be the private sector and the government, to say, okay, we're gonna help you. You want Friendship Bench, let's work to get it going. You wanna do gatekeepers training, let's work to get it going. Stuff like that. So it's also not that the foot soldiers aren't there as far as the CBOs and the NGOs are concerned. It is, they can only do so much. Don?
Yes, I know. I know you. I'm using two apparatus here. One to hear you and the other one to speak. And what I wanted to say, good night, everyone. Sorry I missed most of the event, but I wanted to also comment on the part of Guyana in reference to how do we change this culture of the suicide in Guyana among the young people. I believe, like Dr. Sharma said, we have to develop different strategies to be able to change the dysfunctionality within the families. I find in my practice that one of the major issues is the entire dysfunctionalities of families that come from generations to generations. In my parenting teaching classes, I find I get the most out of those types of environments in ways that I can teach parents how to be parents and how to really understand what young people feel and what they're experiencing, right? As Dr. Sharma said and others have alluded to, we have a very dysfunctional society. We have parents that cheat, we have parents that alcohol, we have many problems within our family structure that's oftentimes hidden. And children pick up on that, and you have high standards for children, religious standards, etc., that they're expected to meet, but you're not the perfect parent. And they're not able to discuss their inner feelings with you. So I feel in the parenting classes, I'm able to teach parents about being able to sit with young people and to understand their feelings and to know that young people have feelings. The ironic thing is what I found is the majority of parents that have children that are contemplating suicide, etc., the reasons why they're contemplating suicide is the same difficulties the parents had. So it is difficult to understand that a parent experiencing being sexually assaulted, raped, or molested, or whatever the case might be, or have a boyfriend or a girlfriend of an opposite religion, or even the opposite sex. But the parents don't seem to understand and set these bars that are so high that the young people can't reach those bars. Neither do they have a recourse of who do I talk to? Who do I share my experiences? Who do I tell my difficulties to, right? So I also agree with the bench theory, right? But in our culture, the problem of confidentiality also plays a big role in how can I come to you and express that I am thinking I'm bisexual, for example, or I'm saying I'm in love with a Muslim young man, but I'm a Hindu woman, or I'm a Christian woman and his parents reject me. My parents also reject me. Those things are very difficult to do in the context of our culture and working with people in Guyana. So I think it's important that we re-educate our parents about dealing with the stressors of young people that they have experienced. Most of them have experienced the same stressors, right? So we need to re-educate them and have more parenting classes about being parents, being open enough to discuss sex, discuss disappointments, discuss pain, discuss being raped, being assaulted, and understanding the dynamics in which children function, especially having access to the internet and all the social media events that we have. We have bullying, we have so many complex issues within our culture, and we have a strong cultural beliefs, both on the religious side, ethnic side. And so those are areas that we in Guyana especially need to work tremendously on. And I believe it also starts with the parents or the elder adults, the aunts, the uncles, the fathers, and also working with young people. Young people come to me and see me. They're in deep fear of talking to their parents, literally afraid to speak with their parents. And we're talking about young people that may be 18 years old, 19-year-olds. They're not babies, they're not 12-year-olds. They're young adults moving into adulthood, are deathly afraid of making decisions of their own or talking to their parents for fear of rejection. And they have lived this life from the age of 12 or younger. So it's important that we have adults understanding the complexity of human behavior, human life, and what impacts them and impacts their well-being and how they develop to be productive adults there. And I just wanted to weigh that in concert with what Dr. Sharma was also saying about our culture. We have to address our culture. We have to address the adults in our culture because they're the ones that's really moving how our children feel and how they progress into being adults, the adults they become, and the cycle's repeated.
All right,
Thank you. I hope
I
you
saw
heard me.
Dr. Gillard and I saw Claudette, but before you go down, you keep saying we have to. Who's this we?
We are all of us, every single human being that can function and can work. We're all responsible in this together. And I hold our adults are more responsible in getting our heads tied around the fact that children are going to have sex. They're going to love who they love, and they're going to be who they be. And with all those things, we have to be able to accept, love, guide, and protect.
All right, we'll come back to that another time. Dr. Gillard, welcome back.
Good night. Sorry, we had an island-wide blackout.
First of all, introduce yourself.
I am Dr. Julius Gilliard. I am a psychiatrist. I work with the Millennium Heights Medical Complex in Castries, St. Lucia, and I'm also in private practice. Been a psychiatrist for just about 4 years, and I have worked in Jamaica for about 3 years, and I worked in Trinidad for 2 years. Suicide is one of my passions.
Okay, so let's hear your contribution.
Okay, so I don't know what was discussed before. So
basically, we're focusing on practical, doable, pragmatic strategies to prevent suicide in the context of the Caribbean.
Okay, so from my practice, what I have noticed is that especially the young person, because suicide is more prevalent among the young persons. So young persons tend to have no clue how to deal with their emotions, or rather most young persons, and they have no clue how to deal with day-to-day stresses. They have no clue how to deal with distress. What I'm also noticing is that a lot of the young persons who have the aggressive tendencies or who end up in correctional facilities have some measure of intellectual disability. So what I am noticing is that persons go up through school and we teach everybody like everybody is the same. So all the lessons at school are geared towards students who are supposedly the same level of IQ, of intelligence, and that is not the case. So a lot of those students go through school, the parents are on their backs to do well. So they get a lot of invalidation at home. And that is an important word in my sphere of practice. It is one word that I try to discuss as much as possible with anybody I come into contact with, because that is something that we see a lot, especially in the Caribbean. So because of our religious culture and our hyper-religious culture, a lot of children now experience a lot of invalidation. So we have persons who maybe it could be something simple, like the child is trying to cook something and mommy or daddy is telling them, you cannot hold the spoon like this, you have to hold the spoon like this. And so the child, this being done over and over again, the child develops thoughts that I cannot do anything right. It's a simple task, but this is how children may process those reactions from their parents. Or the child may have an emotion that he or she wants to express, and they are told, don't be a baby, or man up, or big child like you, thinking those things, or that's stupid to be thinking that, or get over it, those kind of things. So invalidation, and then the child figures what I think does not matter, what I feel does not matter, and eventually I don't matter. So that is something that parents need to be made more aware of, because we grew up in a generation where we were taught a certain kind of parenting. So spare the rod and spoil the child, and that kind of nonsense that we used to be taught before. And that has been proven to not work. And persons are very, very reluctant to move away from that. In their mind, I was raised that way, and I survived, and I am well, so my child can be raised that way as well. And no matter what you try to put into their heads, it does not go through. And I heard a young lady speaking about we need to speak to the parents and so on. A lot of parents don't want to be spoken to. They don't. So what one of my strongest opinions is that we need to change the education system in the in the world, in fact, because that thing about teaching everybody the same subjects, the same material, that does not work. We teach that, and then maybe 15 to 20% of the students move up. The majority of the students never catch on to the work, don't have the capacity for it, and we don't look for options. We're not teaching much life skills. We're not teaching much technical skills, which a lot of the students have the proficiency for. So then a lot of persons go through school feeling a sense of failure. So at home, I can't do anything right. And in school, I keep failing and I don't understand what's going on. So then they grow up feeling I am a failure. And that is a recipe for disaster, for suicide, for crime, for violence, and all kinds of other ills, well, what we name ills in society. So I think we need to start with our education system. We are teaching the same way things were taught 300-400 years ago. In this day, 2021, where I was reading something that says that all of what was taught, or all the information that we've had from 200 years past, every day you have that amount of information being placed on the internet. And we're still teaching the same way that we taught 200, 300, 400 years ago. That cannot work in today's day. If you speak to your children, and I'm sure in the pandemic, any of you speak to if you have teenagers, what you will hear is that school is boring. That is a cry. School is boring, and school is boring because the children now have lots of stimulus in front of them. So information coming at them by the ton loads. So school is boring for them because they're not being challenged at school. They're given work that they can learn in 5 minutes, and then after that, move on. So we need to change the way we teach our children, and we need to teach children more of how to deal with distress, how to deal with emotions, how to deal with disappointment and rejection, how to speak to people, how to be more assertive. So those skills are what children need now, so that when they get through their teenage years, which are difficult years, they have something that they can use to make it through the rest of their lives. Otherwise, they end up after they leave school, and they have no clue. They don't know how to write an application for a job. They don't know how to interact with persons when they go into the workforce. They are lost. So this is my opinion about this. And I guess if we want to speak more about suicide, you will see that a lot of the risks of suicide come from there. So the depression and so on comes from those feelings of, I am a failure, I'm not enough, everybody shuns me, nobody wants me around them because I can never do anything well enough. And so we are actually breeding a generation of children who basically think that they cannot do anything good enough. And we will see, in fact, we're now seeing the impact of it because crime is going up, suicide is going up, depression is going up, anxiety is going up, all sorts of mental illness. The stats are going up. And so we need to try to do something about it now. This education system needs to be changed. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Doc. we want to end at about 8:30, which means we've got, say, 15 minutes more. So this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna go with the hands I saw and any other hands that come, and then we'll wrap. I saw Joy's hand and I saw Dr. Don Stewart's hand. Is there anybody else? Raise your hand again so I can see. Okay, we'll go with those two, and then if anybody else wants to jump in. Shani, take over, call on those two, and anybody else who wants to jump in, please.
All right, so who was it firstly?
Dr. Stewart and Claudette.
All right, so firstly, Dr. Stewart, if you have anything to say regarding the topic we're talking about now, we just heard a great, sorry, I'm hearing feedback. Okay. We just heard a great just summary on why education is very important in preventing suicides, especially for the youth. As a youth myself, you know, this is a very great topic. So if you have anything to enlighten us on, that would be great.
Okay, I do agree that exercise is important. Sorry, I have to work two devices here. Exercise education is absolutely important. When I talk about parenting, I conduct some parenting classes, and through that parenting classes, there's basic education and information as to the difficulties that the psychiatrist just talked about, that children experience, that we go through the process of re-educating parents, because parents are key factors, right? And parents do listen. We have parenting classes that we do here in Guyana, and 60% of the parents that attend the parenting classes, and we monitor them consistently because they're registered with the social protection agencies, right? To see their progress. So for the 3 years that I've been doing it, there has been tremendous amount of progress with the parents' relationship with these children, which is important so that they can understand what the new generation of children are experiencing. So from that standpoint, I'm talking about educating the parents, and I do agree the school education system needs to change, but parenting plays an important role, because those formative years of children within this household that's dysfunctional, and the parent have to understand the household is dysfunctional and stop pretending that the household is not dysfunctional. I've had parents in class that said, when I tell them about children having feelings and children being in love at the age of 6, 7, 8, 12, whatever the case might be, they're astonished, and they'll go, well, we didn't used to do that when we did live like them, but that's you. And this is John. That's why your name is Mary. His name is John. And he's developing differently. You didn't have an internet. You didn't have the things that he has now, that to his availability to be able to make decisions. So we have to prepare them for future life. And we have to prepare them to make them feel like positive human beings, as the psychiatrists just say. But oftentimes, truly so, more negative reactions are given to children in our culture in Guyana. I hear people call their children stupid, dumb. You're not gonna make up to nothing in this time and age, where children are put down and they really can't do anything. So by the time they become adults, like the psychiatrists say, they feel useless. So I think parents play an integral part, and adults, because you hear teachers talk to students in manners that are degrading because they don't understand something, or even in the studies, everywhere around in our culture in Guyana, my experiences. So you put down children, and we need to do better at that. Thank you.
Yes, that was great. I really like how you really emphasized on how it's progressing with the children. You know, times are changing, things are becoming more modern. And in the education system, it's a lot of stress, especially on students. And for having parents be able to accurately and openly communicate with their children is a great first step. And it's just going to be great in general. So is it Miss Spence?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Sister Sharma. My heart is full with a joy that knows that I'm among a team of people who are sharing knowledge and wisdom and insight in the work that you do in working to ease the suffering of our communities. I wanted to speak a little bit about the responsible media, and one of our panelists talked about that they have been able to influence the ways in which suicides are covered in the media. But I want to take it a step further, because while we can have influence in Jamaica, let's say the Gleaner or the Observer, the social media platforms are so much more prevalent than the traditional media. And so I wanted to know if you have had any insights into how we may be able to utilize those different media, like TikTok. I see, it's like a 30-second, 60-second image. It's something that young adults seem to be flocking to. So I wanted to know if you had any insights into how, or maybe you're already using them to reach people who have access. And this is a two-part question, because I know that there are people in remote areas that do not have internet access. And so that's another challenge as we work towards suicide prevention.
Shani?
Hold on, sorry. I was getting a message on my screen. So being part of the youth, when it comes to social media, it's a great platform, especially now, to get your voice out and to get messages around very quickly and very efficiently. So specifically when it comes to suicide prevention, I've done a lot of work when it comes to young women, especially in the Caribbean. After Hurricane Maria, I did a lot of nonprofit work, and I started a nonprofit with my mother where we did a lot of work trying to get sanitary products for young girls. And there I met a lot of girls who would just have a lot of, resentment towards themselves when it came to this kind of bodily things. We went and we got them all kinds of sanitary products, including sanitary pads, napkins such as that, hair products, things like that, but things that they needed. But when it comes specifically to social media and using that as a tool, can I get that question again so I make sure I really accurately pinpoint that? First one.
I wasn't singling you out to be the person to answer that particular question, but we have talked in this forum about getting the media to report responsibly on suicides. And so my question revolves around using the social media that are available to us to hold them responsible in getting out, more encouraging messages.
All right, if I can jump in there. They're beginning to do that. Facebook, for example, has a lot of components within its algorithms. Sometimes they don't all work accurately, but that is able to significant extent to identify suicide ideation and then to act on it. They do so in various ways. They also policing what is posted. And again, the algorithms don't work perfectly, but they're able to a certain extent, tackle myths and misinformation and stuff like that. The others are moving in that direction also. So as far as policing social media, and that will have to be done by the companies themselves, nobody else can do that. But Caribbean Voice strongly believes in harnessing the social media. We've just started. At this point, we have 8 social media sites that together garner about 500,000 views monthly. And I say views because we don't know to what extent they actually stop and look at the videos or stop and read all the articles that we post on suicide and everything on a daily basis. What I have noticed, and for me, this is the worrying sign, is that people will post wrong stuff. They will post myths, misinformation, superstition, and so on. And then when you attempt to engage them in correcting it, they become stubborn, then they become resentful, then they become insultive, then they start to derogate you. So that what should really have been conversations aimed at tackling the myths and the misinformation and so on becomes a back and forth that is aimed at belittling people and standing up for what is wrong. And sometimes they may well realize that it's wrong, but it's just this thing that you're not going to tell me that I'm wrong. I know I'm not. And kind of like what the Trump people do, you know, with all the standing up for all the myths and misinformation. The biggest one being that Trump won the election. You can't tell them that that's not so. So from where I stand, I think activists and advocates and NGOs and CBOs and all the entities that work in suicide prevention and are going to have to be taught how to harness social media in order to foster their advocacy and their activism. For example, right now, our website has been redesigned and it's going to have a lot of interactivity. And that is why I wanted to ask Dr. Barnaby. I'm just asking the question, we'll talk about it. Doc, you mentioned, was it you or Dr. Margaret mentioned something, some tool that allows you to allow people to share and to express themselves on various media platforms like Twitter and Facebook and so on through a tool that is available. We'd like to, if it's possible, we'd like to have that tool integrated into our website so that people can go there and do that as well.
Someone mentioned, I think it was YouReport. Not sure how that is spelled.
Say again?
YouReport?
YouReport.
Yes, that's
Social
it. That's
media
it.
tool.
Dr. Barnaby, were you the person who talked about it? Is she there? Dr. Barnaby?
Can I just say something before she comes back on?
Yes, Margaret.
All right, so a couple of comments quickly. Sometimes you have to call out the media. We talk about responsible reporting and all of that. And in some of my articles, I've called out the media when they have used irresponsible reporting, especially on cases of sexual abuse. I have put it strictly within their lap and I have called them out of it and I called them out on it and they have really stopped it to a very significant extent. That's the first thing. Secondly, I just want to, before I make my last quick comments, I just want to say every time that Devashani said a comment, her dad smiled. And I just want to notice that kind of interaction between both of them because it showed the pride that dad had when daughter was talking, and that is significant. And the last two comments quickly, I know it's a Dr. Dawn, somebody spoke about we have to really allow parents for values and all of these things. I don't believe that. Let me tell you why. If parents have been brought up in households where values were not significant, where priorities were misplaced, where certain things, they cannot teach their children these values, which is why from the outset I said we have to begin in the schools and we have to begin very early where teachers can reach a large number of children, a significant number of children, because at the end of the day, the narrative around suicide must be changed. And a lot of our speakers here this evening have spoken to it. They talked about the importance of education. They talked about the importance of spiritual values. And if you really look at it, all of this really goes into increasing resilience in our homes, strengthening the attachment bonds within our homes, and really making, as I wrote in some of my articles, we have to have a social collective in our society. Each one must reach one. We cannot depend on the individual anymore for this, not in this pandemic, not when suicide rates are increasing among our young, not when people are ignorant about certain things. There must be a social collective, and it has to start with the man on the ground, civil society, our leaders, our politicians, everyone. Each one must reach one. And I want to end on that note. Thank you.
Thank you. At this point, Shani, I'm going to take over just for a minute.
All right.
If you have your candle, I'm hoping that at least some people do. Let's light them now. Good. Okay, Dr. Barnaby, can you hear me? Dr. Barnaby?
It seems she has left the space.
No, I'm still here.
Still there?
Okay, so can you
Yeah.
quickly talk about the significance of light a candle and then give us your closing remarks?
Okay, well, light a candle is to observe and commemorate those who have died by suicide. And it's been going on for now about, I think about 10 years. And at 8, one is supposed to light a candle, put it in a place where it can be observed from outside. And even if it's not, to have it there, because it does serve to remind us that there is always hope, there's always a light shining in the darkness to spread hope, and a light that reminds us of the life that the person represented, and we can remember all of the positive things, and we can use that symbol of light to recognize that part of our mission is to spread light, the light of knowledge, to our fellow human beings, so that suicide becomes less and less of a public health emergency.
Your closing remarks?
Yes, I think that the meeting has been very important as it continues to shed LIGHT on our collective and individual issues in relation to suicidal behavior, and also reminds us that just as our motto, out of many one people, that we can spread it so that out of many minds, many communities, and many organizations, that collectively we can make change that is positive, and we can make change that is sustainable. So we're not thinking so much about money. Money will come because the issue is there, and money will come from sources that you may not expect. But we must all use this image of light to motivate us. Thanks.
Thank you, Doc. Joy?
I am thankful for the opportunity to be in service with such a dedicated group of people. Thank you for sharing with us this evening. May God continue to bless us. May our ancestors continue to journey with us and show us the light that we must follow to help to make a difference in preventing suicide. Thank you.
Don? Thank you, Joy. Don? Closing
Thank you
remarks?
very much. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here this evening to participate. I really do appreciate that. Sorry for being late. And I hope that each and every one of you continue on this journey, call upon our ancestors to keep guiding us through this journey. And as we strive to save every young person that we come in contact with, every human that we come in contact with, to have them live to the fullest capacity that they can. Thank you.
Thank you. Final remark, Margaret?
I continue to stress the social collective. Each one of us must reach one. Thank you everyone for being here and for being part of this journey with you. Special kudos to our youngster in our midst, especially because they are the beacons of hope for the future. Thank you, everyone.
Absolutely. Thank you. Dr. Sharma? Dr.
Thank
Sharma?
you. Yes, yeah, Dr. Chatu
Closing
certainly
remarks?
Dr. Chatu certainly made me smile, and she's made it very, very clear that's the way to go forward. Collective activities by all of us together, we can make it work. I want to comment on the match that lit the candle. One match alone has power to burn down a whole forest, but one match alone has no strength. If you were to try to break it, you can easily break it. But if you take the whole box of matches and put them together, you can't break it. So when we work together as a team, and I'm hopeful that this team will become the force to make the change. We have Dr. Gillard, who spoke so beautifully and exactly what we need to do. Change that educational system. It is out of date. It's not reaching our kids. It's reaching a few people, and it's not working. Change it. We got to address the majority of our people who are neglected. So together we'll make it happen. I can't do it alone. I've seen that myself. I go to the politicians, they listen and they don't bother. So we got to do it as a force together, the Caribbean Voice. With our support, we will make it happen. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Dave. Dr. Gillard, closing remarks?
Yes, so suicide is one ill that we need to stamp out of our society. And especially wherever that we can. I am always grateful to be sharing on this day, on September 10th. And I am always happy when I see healthcare professionals come together to try to find solutions to that ill. It's important because we should be more of a solution-based society and less of a complaining society. We tend to do a lot of that, complain and blame one and blame that one. But I'm happy that I am here because I'm with a group of persons who seem to be solution oriented. And I think if we continue to come together like this, we can find solutions to this ill, and we can raise children who can take the mantle from us and continue to preach and bring mental health to the rest of the society, because mental health has been stigmatized for too long. If we raise the young people in that kind of environment where they see persons who don't stigmatize other persons, they see persons who don't bully other persons, they see persons who see other persons as human beings, very important, and not as a patient, but as a human being, not as an illness, but as a human being, then what will happen is that the next generation will be well equipped to eradicate that ill of suicide that we've had plaguing our society for so many years. So kudos to everybody here. Because although I was late, it was a very good experience to be here.
Thank you, Doc. Aubrey, are you there? Aubrey. Okay, I guess he's not. Aubrey is one of the leading personnel within the Caribbean Voice. So I had wanted to ask him to say a few words, but he doesn't seem to be there. Just two things before we close off. Talking about young people and talking about change, the Caribbean Voice just launched a 3-year project called Project Change that is going to be implemented across the English-speaking Caribbean, all 17 nations. Essentially, the end goal is to be able to identify and train young people within communities as gatekeepers, domestic violence gatekeepers, so that they can go back into their communities and be the proactive eyes and ears of those communities. It's hinged on an essay competition that we're launching in all high schools from 4 to 6 forms. And the topic is going to focus on gender-based violence. A significant portion of the research has to be original primary research done within their communities, so that they begin to make the connections within their communities, even as they're doing the academic research. We will be at the region level, we'll be offering a first prize of $3,000 or in kind, depending, a second prize of $2,000 or in kind, and a third prize of $1,000 or in kind. We will be reaching out to the ministries of education in all these nations. We're hoping that they can come on board, because they're the ones who can help us to put the logistics in place. And we're hoping that they can also organize within their own individual nations national prize giving for first, second, and third, or however they want to within each country. That being said, I'm going to call on Shani to close off for us.
Hello, everyone. It has been a great discussion. Thank you all for joining and pitching in and giving your words. Everyone told great stories and great information. And I think from this point on, having conversations like this is really going to push us forward into stopping this epidemic of suicides. Thank you all for joining. And for those watching at home, thank you for listening in. And it's been a great conversation. Stay safe and stay healthy. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Shani. Those who have accessed the video, please help us share it, because the more people access the information, the greater the impact would be.